Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, let us slip gently into the magical world you know so well, the one with stone corridors that whisper forgotten spells, staircases that shift when no one is watching, and portraits that snore softly in their frames. Tonight, we return to Hogwarts, not in the rush of classes or the noise of Quidditch matches, but in the calm of twilight, when the castle hums in low, contented tones, and the shadows are friendly companions to the light. This is a story not about great battles or fearsome curses. No, tonight's tale is softer than that. It's about a simple candle, a little flame that flickered where it shouldn't have, and about the quiet footsteps that followed it down into the deep, secret places of the school. The places that even the professors don't speak of anymore. The kind of places that are not dangerous, not tonight, only mysterious and warm and ancient. So come along gently now. Wrap yourself in a blanket, rest your head just so, and let the hush of the castle guide you. And if you find yourself smiling at a familiar name or remembering the scent of the library's oldest books, well, that's Hogwarts welcoming you back. If you enjoy these magical journeys, you're always welcome to tap the little heart, hit the bell so you never miss another cozy tale, or simply close your eyes and let the story carry you off. There are more adventures waiting quietly in the shelves. All you have to do is listen. Now, the fire has been banked low in the Gryffindor common room. The windows are misty with nighttime breath, and the enchanted ceiling above the great hall has slipped into a velvety dusk, stars blinking in their magical rhythm. The kitchens have gone quiet, the house elves humming lullabies to themselves as they polish tomorrow's cutlery. Far above, the astronomy tower watches over the hills, its spire casting long, sleepy shadows across the grounds. It is in this quiet, this golden hour between candlelight and dreamlight, that our story begins. The common room is nearly empty now. The warm red armchairs still hold the shapes of the students who sat in them all day, and the fire, while gentle, gives off a sleepy glow that makes your eyelids feel heavier just looking at it. On the mantel above the hearth sits a single candle, unlit at first glance and rather ordinary looking. But then, if you were to blink or turn your head just slightly, you might catch it flickering, only for a second, as if the flame is hiding from you, or waiting to be noticed, waiting to be followed, because sometimes Hogwarts doesn't call to you with trumpets or alarms. Sometimes it sends a candle, and tonight, that little candle is about to show someone, quite unexpectedly, a hidden dungeon that no one has walked in a very, very long time. Are you ready? In the heart of Gryffindor Tower, tucked beneath a crimson blanket and resting her head against the plush curve of her favorite armchair, Hermione Granger was not reading a book for once. She had tried, of course. A dusty volume of Ancient Charms of the Founding Era lay open on her lap. But the warmth of the fire, the rhythmic ticking of the old grandfather clock, and the distant soft hoot of an owl had lulled her into a dreamlike drowsiness. Her curls framed her face like a halo of quiet thoughts, and her eyes flicked sleepily toward the shadows along the stone wall. Across from her, Ron Weasley had given up entirely. He was half sprawled on a faded rug, arms behind his head, wand slipping from his pocket as he breathed softly in and out, snoring only slightly. He had planned to speak up and watch the fire die down, but somewhere between the second helping of treacle tart at dinner and Hermione's quiet musings about candlelight magic, he had simply drifted off. His ginger hair caught the flicker of the flames, casting a gentle orange glow around him like a sleepy lion at rest. Nearby, Harry Potter sat perched on the window seat, his glasses slightly fogged from the cool night air that slipped in through the tiny gap in the window frame. He wasn't tired, not really, but he wasn't quite awake either. His mind wandered, as it often did at night, through memories of hidden rooms, forgotten spells, and all the secrets Hogwarts had revealed to him over the years. Yet tonight felt different, softer, as if the castle itself had drawn a warm breath and hushed the world to sleep. Crookshanks was curled at Hermione's feet, tail twitching once in a while, as though dreaming of chasing poltergeists through the halls. Even the fat lady in the portrait had dozed off, a soft hum escaping her painted lips. These were the characters of tonight's adventure, not in their usual heroic stances or mid-duel dramatics, but as they truly were when the world grew quiet. Just three friends, wrapped in wool and wonder, surrounded by ancient stone and friendly ghosts. Hogwarts wasn't just a school to them, it was home. And like all true homes, it sometimes had a way of offering mysteries at just the right moment, not for glory, but for curiosity. So when the quiet little candle, the one no one had lit, gave a tiny, unexpected flicker on the mantelpiece, it was Hermione who noticed first. Her brow furrowed gently. Harry turned his head. Ron, half awake, muttered something about pudding, but the candle shimmered again, and though none of them spoke right away, they each felt it, the pull, the gentle, magical invitation that didn't need words. In the stillness of the common room, where dreams and waking thoughts often mixed, a soft adventure had just begun. And these three, as tired and cozy as they were, would soon find themselves following a flame into the unknown. The candle on the mantelpiece was an ordinary thing, or at least, it had always seemed that way. Short, squat, and made of ivory-colored wax, it had never been lit, never moved, never mentioned. In fact, it had been there for as long as the trio could remember, part of the decor of Gryffindor Tower, like the old chess set in the corner or the threadbare cushion that Ron always claimed first. And yet tonight, that same unremarkable candle was casting a light no one had asked it to. A small flame wavered atop the wick, dancing silently in a room that had otherwise gone still. Hermione sat up slowly, brushing the sleep from her eyes, and peered at it. The light it gave off wasn't like the usual golden glow of fire. It shimmered faintly, like moonlight caught in glass. It seemed both warm and distant, familiar yet far away. She leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. "Harry, look at that," she whispered. Harry turned from the window, his glasses catching the reflection of the candle's odd, silvery light. He blinked, squinting. "Did you light that?" Hermione shook her head. It lit itself. Ron, now propped up on one elbow, squinted blearily. "It's just a candle," he muttered, then yawned, but even his voice held a trace of hesitation, as if part of him knew, deep down, that it was no ordinary flicker of flame. And then it moved. Not the candle itself, no, but the flame. It tilted like a compass needle drawn towards something just out of reach. Hermione gasped as it leaned toward the far wall and then began to stretch. The flame elongated, becoming thin and thread-like, as though being pulled towards something unseen. "What in Merlin's name?" Harry murmured. The thread of light, impossibly slender and glowing, touched the stone wall just beside the portrait of Godric Gryffindor. And the moment it did, the stones rippled. It was not a violent ripple, no earthquake shook the room, but rather a soft shimmering, like water disturbed by a gentle breeze. The wall, solid and ancient, shimmered like silk. The three of them stared, frozen. The candle's flame then snapped out, vanishing with a quiet hiss, and the room plunged into natural darkness again. Firelight, shadows, silence. But the wall was no longer what it had been. Where there had once been plain stone, a small arch now stood. It hadn't been there a moment before. It was narrow, no taller than Hermione herself, and filled not with brick or shadow, but with a faint mist, silver and swirling, like the memory pensives they had used before. Ron blinked hard. "Tell me I'm dreaming." Hermione was already standing. "You're not." Harry walked slowly toward the arch, cautious, curious. He raised his wand but didn't speak. No spell left his lips. He didn't want to startle it, whatever it was. As he drew closer, something unexpected happened. The mist inside the arch shimmered again, and a faint hum began to rise, soft and musical, like the chime of crystal bells carried on the wind. And then, in the very center of the mist, something took shape, a face, pale, gentle, and unfamiliar, not frightening, not skeletal or monstrous, but confused, as though the face itself had just woken from a long nap and was trying to remember where it was. The eyes were large and kind, the expression peaceful but lost. Hermione gasped softly, "It's a ghost." But Harry shook his head. No, not exactly. The face faded in and out, as if struggling to maintain its form. The mist trembled around it, and then, in a whisper that barely reached their ears, a voice spoke. "Why is it so quiet?" Harry's brows furrowed. "What?" The face flickered again, becoming clearer. The voice, though still faint, grew more certain. "Where is everyone?" Ron had now stepped forward, arms crossed tightly. "Who are you?" The mist swirled. The ghostly figure inside seemed to pause, puzzled by the question. I don't remember," it whispered. Hermione tilted her head, her voice soft. "You don't know who you are?" The ghost, or spirit, or whatever it was, closed its eyes. "I remember lights and laughter, so many voices, but now..." Its eyes opened, looking straight at them. "Now it's quiet, so quiet." The sadness in the voice was not sharp or sorrowful, but deep, like a memory of something once loved and long lost. The trio exchanged glances. This wasn't a haunting. It was something gentler, something forgotten. Hermione took a step closer, her tone curious but caring. Do you know where you are? A pause, then a soft whisper. I think I'm still in the castle. Am I? Yes, Harry said quietly. You're in Gryffindor Tower. The spirit blinked slowly, and for a brief moment, a smile flickered across its lips. Gryffindor Tower. I remember. I think I was here. Once. Ron rubbed the back of his neck. You were a student? The spirit didn't answer. It simply floated there, unsure, like a candle flame unsure of the wind. Hermione turned back to the others, whispering, I've read about things like this, spirits that remain not because they're bound, but because they've forgotten how to leave. They don't know they've passed. Harry looked back toward the arch. So this might be someone who died, but didn't know it. Hermione nodded slowly. And the candle, maybe it was connected to them somehow, a memory anchor. The arch shimmered again. The ghost spoke once more. Would you stay with me? Just a little while. I feel cold, and I don't want to be alone anymore. There was something heartbreaking about the way the spirit asked, not demanding, not desperate, just honest, as if the loneliness of time had finally become too heavy to carry. Harry stepped closer. Of course we will. Ron gave a small nod. Yeah, we're not going anywhere. Hermione pulled one of the chairs closer to the arch, sitting down with her hands clasped. Do you remember your name? The spirit's eyes closed again. A long pause. Then, Evelyn. The name passed over them like a breeze through the common room. The walls didn't echo it, but they seemed to remember it somehow. Evelyn. She was still there, within the mist, soft, gentle, flickering. But with each question, with each a kind word, she seemed more real, as if their presence, their attention, helped anchor her back to the world for just a moment longer. They sat with her for minutes, then for an hour, talking gently, asking about anything she could recall. Evelyn remembered candlelit corridors, dancing banners, secret staircases. She laughed once when Hermione asked about her favorite subject. Arithmancy, she said, though I was dreadful at it. It was peaceful, it was quiet, and then Evelyn said, I think I forgot something very important. They looked up. What is it? Harry asked. She didn't answer at first, just floated there, her form slowly fading again. I think I forgot that I was gone. The three friends stayed still. I think, she whispered, that I died, and no one noticed, not out of cruelty, but because time moves, because everyone moves, and I stayed. Tears welled in Hermione's eyes, but she blinked them back. We notice you. Evelyn's face lit up with the gentlest smile. Thank you. And just like that, the mist inside the arch began to glow, not dimly, but warmly, brightly, not blinding, but like the warmth of a sunrise behind a hill. The face of Evelyn began to lift upward, like it was floating to meet that glow. I remember now, she whispered. The glow turned golden, and then she was gone. The mist faded, the arch shimmered once, and the wall was stone again. The common room was still. No trace of the mysterious arch remained. The candle sat unlit on the mantelpiece, its wick quiet, as if the flicker of the ghost named Evelyn had been no more than a dream, and yet something had shifted. The room didn't feel heavier. It felt softer, as though the very air had grown aware of her name. Hermione sat quietly, scribbling in a parchment-bound notebook she always kept nearby. Her quill moved slowly, more thoughtful than studious. She remembered her name, she murmured, Evelyn. Ron was watching the fire, its crackle unusually gentle. Do you think she's gone for good? I don't know, Harry said, his voice low, but I don't think she was finished. And just as he said it, something very strange happened. The portrait of Godric Gryffindor gave a subtle shudder, not loud, not alarming, just a quiet shift, like someone stirring in their sleep. The trio froze. Ron leaned forward. Did that just... Yes, Hermione whispered. It moved. They approached cautiously. The painted figure of Godric remained stoic, his hand resting on the hilt of a painted sword, but the background behind him, the rich crimson tapestry that had always framed him, had changed. It now showed a hallway none of them had ever seen. Hold on, Harry whispered. That wasn't there before. Before they could say anything more, the portrait blinked. Not Godric, but the background. The hallway shimmered, and then it pulsed softly, an invitation. Hermione reached out and gently pressed her fingers to the painting's surface. Instead of cool canvas, her hand met a strange warmth, like touching sunlight caught in cloth. And suddenly, without warning, the wall behind the portrait rippled, just like the stone wall had before. Not harshly, not like an explosion, but like silk being brushed by wind. Then, with a quiet hum, the portrait swung forward like a hidden door, revealing a real hallway behind it. They stepped through. What they entered was not like the Hogwarts they knew. It was familiar, yes, stone arches, flickering torchlight, but also older. The stones felt aged beyond their time, the light gentler, tinged with a sepia hue. It was as if they had stepped into a memory, a preserved echo of the past. This isn't the present Hogwarts, Hermione whispered, her eyes wide. No, Harry agreed. This is Evelyn's Hogwarts. The corridor was quiet. The light didn't cast harsh shadows. It pooled softly at their feet, like moonlight. The air held the scent of parchment, lavender, and a hint of something like powdered sugar. Ron sniffed. Smells like honeydukes in here. They walked slowly. Along the walls, faded paintings stirred, not like the lively portraits of their present day, but gentler ones, sleeping within their frames, some barely aware. A painting of a girl with ink-stained fingers lifted her head and smiled faintly before fading back into stillness. There were no staircases that moved, no suits of armor clanking, just a silent sense of something beautiful that had once been very alive, now drifting like smoke through forgotten time. Hermione stopped beside a doorway. Its plaque read, Arithmancy, East Wing. Her eyes softened. She really did study here, she whispered. Harry opened the door. Inside, the classroom was frozen in another time, desks in neat rows, an abacus on the chalkboard. But it wasn't dusty. It wasn't abandoned. It was paused, like someone had stepped out for tea and never returned. On one desk, a parchment sat unfurled, A quill rested in an inkwell, mid-drip. As Hermione stepped closer, the ink lifted itself from the parchment. Not upward, but backward. Words began to erase themselves, one by one, letters sliding off the page in reverse. Then, as the last line vanished, the parchment glowed faintly and began to rewrite itself, but not with ink, with light. Evelyn's handwriting. Today I sat by the window again. I know I should have been paying attention, but the sun looked too lovely to ignore. Professor Binns said something about numerical harmonics. I still don't understand, but I smiled when he called me by name. Hermione's hand flew to her mouth. The glowing words kept flowing. Sometimes I feel like I'm drifting, like I belong here and yet not quite. I forget things, small things, but then I remember the way the light looks on the floor at noon, or how the portraits whisper at night, and it anchors me. Ron leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide. It's a diary entry. Hermione nodded, wiping at her eye. A memory. The light faded. The parchment went still again, but the desk in front of them shifted, slowly sliding aside to reveal a hatch underneath. Harry reached down and opened it. Inside was a staircase leading downward, narrow, torchlit, and spiraling. "You've got to be kidding me," Ron muttered, but they descended. At the bottom, they emerged into a circular room, cozy, warm, filled with shelves. Not a dungeon, a den. There were plush chairs, faded books, a crackling fireplace, even though there was no wood. It was a place built from memory, not matter. Hermione turned slowly, eyes wide. She made this. "How?" Harry whispered. "Some spirits. They don't just linger," Hermione said, her voice reverent. "They leave behind impressions, places wrapped in emotion. This is one of them." As they explored the room, they began to uncover more echoes. A tiny box under a chair held ribbons from the Yule Ball. A parchment folded inside a book revealed Evelyn's name, Evelyn Corwin, class of 1897. Ron blinked. She's been gone for over 100 years. There was a warmth here that none of them could explain, like a grandmother's hug preserved in the folds of a quilt. It wasn't haunting, it was holding. And then, above the fireplace, a tapestry shimmered into being, not woven, not sewn, but built from memory. It showed Evelyn herself. She stood beside the fireplace, arms crossed, smiling faintly. As they watched, the woven figure turned and looked at them. Her voice came not from her mouth, but from the room itself, gentle and everywhere at once. "You found me." Harry stepped forward. "We did, and we remember you." Evelyn smiled. "That is all I ever wanted." There was a long pause, a comfortable silence, and then she said, "There is one more thing." The room grew still. "In the tower, behind the spiral window, I left something. The last thing I couldn't remember. If you find it, I think I can finally rest." Hermione nodded slowly. "We'll find it." The room began to fade, gently, like a candle being blown out in slow motion, not disappearing, but folding, returning to stillness. As they stepped back into the hallway, the spiral stairs above them shifted. A new path formed. The castle itself was remembering. The castle whispered now, not in words, but in the slow curling of staircases that hadn't moved in decades, in the hush of portraits whose eyes lingered just a second too long, in doorways that opened not with creaks, but with breath. Hogwarts, it seemed, was remembering her. And Evelyn, the ghost who forgot she was gone, had begun to wake the memories buried in its very stones. After their time in the preserved study chamber, Harry, Hermione, and Ron returned to the common room only to find that the spiral staircase near the window, once a dead end, now curled upward into the tower, winding higher than they'd ever seen it climb before. "It was never this tall," Ron said, squinting upward. "It's changing," Hermione whispered, responding to Evelyn, or Evelyn's responding to it, Harry added. None of them were afraid. Curious, yes, suspense clung to them gently, like mist on their cloaks. But it was not the kind of suspense that brought fear. It was the kind that brought wonder, the kind that whispered, "Go just a little further." Up they climbed. The tower was unusually warm, even as the wind tapped softly on the windows like a forgotten lullaby, and as they ascended, they noticed something strange. The steps beneath their feet began to change, from smooth stone to intricately carved wood. The kind of wood that creaked like floorboards in an old house, though there was no sound, only the illusion. Portraits lined the stairwell walls, but these weren't of famous wizards or past headmasters. They were children, dozens of them. Some wore Gryffindor robes, others faded greens and blues, even old bronze, all young, all frozen mid-laugh or mid-thought. Not grand portraits meant for history, but personal ones, as if this place had once been someone's secret gallery. And then, halfway up the stairwell, one portrait began to move. The girl in it blinked. Ron took a step back, hand to his chest. Okay, that was new. The portrait girl tilted her head. She had Evelyn's eyes. "It's her," Hermione breathed. The girl looked at them, a faint smile touching her lips. And then, slowly, she pointed upward toward the top of the tower. As her finger rose, a soft hum filled the space, barely audible, like a memory trying to sing. Hermione whispered, "She wants us to keep going." When they reached the top, they found a door. It was small, made of worn oak and etched with stars and moons, childlike drawings, not powerful runes. There was no lock, no charm, only a simple brass handle. Harry opened it. Inside was a circular room with windows on all sides, and in the center, a spiral of light spinning lazily above the floor, like a wisp of steam that refused to settle. The room smelled faintly of chalk and wildflowers, and something deeper, old paper, dusted sugar, and time. The windows showed a version of the grounds they didn't recognize. The lake was smaller, the trees were younger, Hogsmeade was missing entirely. They were seeing the castle not just from above, but from before. "This is a memory tower," Hermione whispered. "I read about these. They were built centuries ago, meant to preserve emotion, not just thought, feeling." The spiral of light pulsed gently, and the room shifted. Suddenly, the tower filled with music, a gentle melody on a music box, faint and distant. A child's laugh echoed once, then again, closer this time, and then Evelyn's voice. "I liked it best here, up high, where the wind felt like it belonged to me. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't even a ghost. It was a trace, a living fragment of her soul left behind in memory. The spiral light expanded slowly, revealing a swirl of scenes. Evelyn in a Gryffindor scarf, writing in a journal. Evelyn reading by candlelight. Evelyn peeking out the tower window during a thunderstorm. And then one final image. Evelyn standing in the same room they now stood in, looking down at a small, enchanted flame in her palm. Her expression wasn't scared, it was puzzled. "I thought it would go out when I left," she whispered, "but it didn't." The spiral flame flickered once, then slowed, and the memory faded. Harry stared at the place where she had stood. She didn't know she had died. "No," Hermione said softly. "She thought she'd left Hogwarts, but her soul stayed. The castle remembered her, even when she didn't." Ron stepped toward the center of the room. There, on the floor, a circle of etched stars formed a ring. In the middle was a candle, identical to the one from the common room, but not quite. This one hissed faintly with gold. "Do we light it?" Ron asked. "I think it's already lit," Harry said. Hermione reached into her pocket and pulled out the diary parchment they'd found before, the one that had erased and rewritten itself in Evelyn's hand. She placed it gently beside the candle. As soon as she did, the candle flared, not violently, not blinding, just warm. The windows in the tower brightened, revealing dawn outside. The illusion of an older Hogwarts began to melt away, slowly, gently. The lake swelled, the trees matured, Hogsmeade flickered into place in the distance. The present had returned, but Evelyn had not vanished. Her presence lingered, not like a ghost haunting a corridor, but like a voice still echoing in a favorite room. "She's becoming a part of the castle again," Hermione whispered. The candles stayed lit, not with fire, but with memory. They left the tower with care, descending the restored staircase in silence. When they reached the common room again, they were met with a quiet surprise. The portraits that once lined the walls now held one new frame: Evelyn. She stood by a window, arms folded, gazing out thoughtfully. When they entered, she turned and smiled, not the haunted smile from before, but something complete. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her memory had found its home. The soft candlelight followed them now, not as a flame flickering through shadowy halls, but as a gentle glow that clung to their presence, comforting, almost like a memory resting on their shoulders. The castle was quieter than usual, as if Hogwarts itself was taking slow, deep breaths. Even the staircases seemed reluctant to move too quickly, as though they didn't wish to disturb what had just passed. After their visit to the memory tower, Harry, Hermione, and Ron found themselves walking slowly through the halls, not quite ready to return to their rooms. Something about the air around them felt changed, lighter somehow, but also full, like the space between walls had been filled with something ancient and kind. "She was just forgotten," Ron murmured, more to himself than to the others. "Imagine that. Just a kid, gone, and nobody remembered her until now." Hermione touched the edge of the parchment, still folded in her cloak pocket. "Not forgotten," she said gently, "just waiting." They turned down a familiar corridor, one that had always been lined with sleeping suits of armor and quiet portraits. But now, one painting near the end glowed softly, not bright enough to distract, but warm enough to invite. It was a small portrait, simple, a girl with soft brown hair sitting cross-legged on a windowsill, Hogwarts in the background, a book resting in her lap. Evelyn. She turned slightly in the painting and looked out toward them, not with surprise, but with familiarity, as though she'd been expecting this moment. And then, something even more curious happened. The painting shimmered, its frame pulsed once with gold, and the edges rippled, revealing a second image tucked just behind the first, almost like a page turning. Evelyn, this time a little older, sat in a round room with shelves of books stacked high around her. A spiral staircase descended in the background. The room was unfamiliar. Hermione leaned forward. "That's not part of the castle we've seen." Ron tilted his head. "Another room?" Harry nodded, or a place she remembered. The painting shimmered again, revealing a third glimpse, Evelyn seated by a small fountain beneath what looked like a glass ceiling, stars twinkling above. Each shift of the portrait seemed to unlock another part of Evelyn's world. Hermione turned to the others. "She's showing us something." The idea wasn't sudden, it wasn't dramatic. It simply arrived like a falling feather, soft, slow, and obvious. "She wants us to explore," Harry said quietly. And so they did. They began with the room in the painting, a spiral library that hadn't been marked on any map. Following a trail of symbols subtly etched into the walls, small stars, moons, and a curled feather or two, they found a hidden door tucked behind a tapestry of the giant squid learning ballet. It didn't require magic to open, only a quiet knock and a moment of patience. The door creaked softly and opened into a rounded space that smelled of aged parchment, lavender, and lemon drops. Shelves reached to the ceiling, and in the center, a sunken reading area held plush velvet cushions and a fireplace that glowed without flame. Books lined the walls in no particular order, titles long out of print, handwritten diaries, spell scrolls curled into brass rings. Some glowed faintly, while others whispered their titles as the trio passed by. Hermione gasped. "This is a memory library." Ron raised a brow. "A what now?" "Books infused with memories," she said, fingers tracing one glowing spine. "Some students used to pour their experiences into enchanted pages. It was considered an old form of magical journaling." Harry ran his hand along the wall. "These are all from Evelyn's time?" "Not just hers," Hermione whispered, "but maybe ones she read, ones that remembered her." They each chose a book. Harry selected one titled "The Clock That Ran Backwards." As he opened it, the words shimmered and formed a quiet illusion, showing a scene of two first years running through the halls after hours, giggling, chased by the gentle ticking of an enchanted pocket watch. It was playful, safe, happy. Ron found a Poller book, tucked near the bottom, titled "Things I Never Told Anyone." He hesitated, then carefully flipped it open. Inside was a list, one entry per page. "I once planted honeysuckle seeds in the library garden just to see if they'd grow." Sometimes I dream of becoming a painting so I never have to leave. I think I might be afraid of being forgotten more than I am of the dark. Ron didn't speak for a while. He just closed the book slowly and rested it back on the shelf. Hermione's book was older, bound in soft fabric, titled Letters to the Moon. It held no moving images, no sound, just page after page of handwritten letters addressed simply to Luna. They weren't meant for someone named Luna, they soon realized, but for the moon itself. You always see me when no one else does. I hope you remember my name when I forget it. Hermione gently closed the cover, brushing a finger over the embroidered title. She gave so much of herself, she whispered, to the books, to the walls, to the moon. The room felt like a memory gently held in cupped hands. It wasn't sad, it wasn't joyful, it was still, deeply still. When they left the library, the candlelight followed once more, no longer just a guide, but a companion. They followed the next image in the portrait, a glass ceiling and a small fountain. That room took longer to find, hidden behind the charms corridor, accessible only through a set of double doors that shimmered like mirages when approached without intention. The glass dome above offered a perfect view of the stars, despite the weather outside. And in the center, a low circular fountain babbled quietly, water flowing without source or end. Evelyn sat on the edge in the painting, toes just above the surface. The trio sat where she had once been, letting the gentle sounds soothe their thoughts. There were no new discoveries that night, no magical twists or ancient riddles, just a quiet place. And that, they realized, was what Evelyn had truly wanted to share. Not secrets, not power, just spaces she loved, memories she didn't want to lose, moments she hoped someone, someday, would remember too. And in doing so, she gave them something precious, not only a glimpse of who she was, but a reason to slow down. The candle had grown warmer in Harry's hand, as though responding not to flame, but to memory. Its glow pulsed in slow, calm waves, casting golden light along the stone walls of the hidden dungeon chamber. There was no longer fear in the air, only a hush, as if the very stones of Hogwarts were waiting to exhale. Hermione stepped beside Harry, her eyes wide but soft with curiosity. Ron, too, had grown quiet. He wasn't cracking jokes or glancing behind his shoulder anymore. Something about this place felt respectful, like they were inside a memory older than the castle itself. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. Upon it rested a round object cloaked in faded velvet. Dust floated lazily in the air around it, swirling gently with each breath. The candlelight flickered across the cover, illuminating small embroidered stars sewn into the cloth, familiar stars stitched in the pattern of the night sky over Hogwarts. Harry reached out and lifted the cloth with care, revealing an orb made entirely of glass and starlight. Inside it, constellations shifted slowly, like thoughts drifting across a dream. Hermione gasped softly. "It's a Starkeeper's memory sphere. I've only read about them. They were created by early professors to hold dreams, memories, and things too fragile to write down." Ron leaned in. "So, Someone left their dreams down here? Not just someone, whispered Hermione. Listen. And so they did. A low, melodic hum began to fill the chamber, not from the sphere itself, but from the air around it, like wind moving through chimes or a lullaby long forgotten. Then, as if the sphere had finally noticed it was no longer alone, it began to glow brighter, and a soft voice rose into the room. The voice was gentle, feminine, and filled with the kind of longing that feels like the space between sleep and waking. If you found this light, then perhaps you too have wandered the halls at night, feeling as though something just beneath the surface of the castle was calling your name. Hermione clutched her sleeves. The voice continued, I was once a student here, many years ago, quiet, a listener, a dreamer, who walked softly and watched stars from the astronomy tower, even when it rained. I loved this place not for its spells or moving staircases, but for its hidden stories, its silences, its echoes. The candle's glow gently intensified, wrapping the trio in warmth. One night, I followed a candle that wouldn't go out. Down a hallway I didn't remember, past portraits that blinked but said nothing. The flame led me here, to this very room. I was alone, but I didn't feel afraid. Instead, I felt expected. The sphere pulsed with starlight, and so I began to leave pieces of myself behind. Memories too delicate for ink, dreams too bright for parchment. I poured them into this sphere so that one day someone else who listened closely might find them, not for glory, not for answers, but simply to know that they are not the only one who hears the quiet magic. Harry took a step closer. I don't know if you can hear me, he whispered, but I think we do hear it, the quiet magic. It's been guiding us all night. The sphere twinkled as though smiling, then the voice returned, fading into a final gentle echo. When you return to the world above, carry the silence with you. Remember that not all magic shouts, some of it only whispers, and in that whisper, you may find the softest truths. And just like that, the glow began to fade. The chamber dimmed once more, but something had changed. The three of them stood in silence, each feeling a sense of calm they hadn't known they were searching for. Not an answer, not a solution, but something quieter, a knowing, a connection to a thread of magic woven so softly into Hogwarts that only those who truly listened would ever feel it. Ron rubbed his arm. You know, I always thought adventures needed explosions and curses and giant snakes, but that was kind of lovely. Hermione smiled. Sometimes the most powerful magic is the quiet kind, the kind that reminds you to wonder. Harry said nothing. He was still looking at the Starkeeper's sphere, but with the eyes of someone who had uncovered a secret, but with the gaze of someone who had just remembered something important. Without a word, he placed the velvet cloth back over the sphere, tucking it gently, as though he were saying goodnight to an old friend. As they turned to leave, the candle that had brought them all this way flickered once more. But this time, its flame was softer, steadier, no longer searching. It had done what it was meant to do. It had guided them home. The silence that followed was like a lullaby, thick and warm, as if the castle itself exhaled a gentle breath. The mysterious light that had once danced ahead of them had finally faded, and in its place, only the soft flicker of their own candle remained. It seemed quieter now, more serene than the hallways they had wandered. The air, once so full of questions and cautious steps, now wrapped around them like a comforting cloak. The dungeon had shared its secret, and in return had accepted them, then released them peacefully. As they slowly made their way back up the worn spiral staircase, the sound of their footsteps seemed more certain, less tentative. The candle no longer wavered, burning with a steady flame, as if the castle itself was now guiding them home. Harry led the way, cradling the candle like a fragile memory, while Hermione trailed behind, a quiet smile playing at her lips. Ron, though tired, walked with a strange kind of contentment, as though the fear had melted into something more meaningful. Once they reached the upper floors, the familiar sights of Hogwarts greeted them like old friends. The swinging portrait of the Fat Lady, the cozy warmth of the carpeted corridors, the paintings softly snoring in their frames. It felt like returning from a dream, the kind that changes you while you're lost inside it, but leaves you better when you wake. Back in the Gryffindor common room, the fire was low but still alive, crackling with the same soft promise of safety. The armchairs still held the shapes of people long gone to bed, and the table bore their half-finished cups of cocoa, now cold, but somehow comforting in their stillness. Without speaking much, the three friends sank into their seats. No grand explanations were needed. The candle was placed gently on the table between them. It continued to burn, soft, golden, and calm. It didn't dance anymore, didn't call them toward new mysteries. It had done its part. Now it rested, and so did they. Hermione leaned back and closed her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Not every mystery needs solving. Some just need feeling, Harry nodded, and some candles burn not to lead you away, but to bring you back. Ron yawned, stretched, then glanced at the flame with softened eyes. Remind me to follow strange floating lights more often, after a nap. They all chuckled quietly, the kind of laugh that comes after a gentle journey, where nothing too terrible had happened, but something meaningful had shifted. Outside the windows, snow began to fall, not heavy, just a light dusting, a silent curtain between night and morning. The castle was still, but not asleep. It watched them, guarded them, cared for them in its ancient, magical way. And the candle, that mysterious, magical candle, burned on. The hour grew late, and the hush of the castle deepened. The Gryffindor common room, now bathed in the soft golden glow of the small candle and the last embers of the fireplace, felt like a world tucked safely away from the noise of questions and the weight of wonder. The adventure was over, and the silence that followed was not empty, but full, like a soft blanket woven from memory, courage, and quiet joy. Harry leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head, gazing into the calm flicker of the flame. There was peace in his eyes, the kind that only came after curiosity had been fed and fear had been faced. Not all nights needed answers. Some nights only needed hearts that listened and friends who stayed close. Ron was already dozing, his head tilting sideways, soft snores mixing with the low crackle of fire. Hermione watched him with a warm smile and then turned to Harry. "Do you think anyone will ever know about that dungeon?" she asked softly. Harry shook his head, but not in sadness. "Some places don't want to be found, not by everyone, only by those who need them." The candle gave a little flicker then, as if in agreement. Its light no longer beckoned, it simply existed, a quiet companion to their thoughts. There was something reassuring in knowing that the world held hidden places, quiet moments, and magic that asked for nothing but trust. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, cloaking the castle in softness. No alarms, no shouts, no urgent mysteries pressing in. Just the rhythm of breath, the warmth of the room, and the knowledge that whatever waited beyond tomorrow, tonight was safe. And that was enough. So, if you ever find yourself walking down a long hallway and a single candle floats into view, don't be afraid. Follow it slowly. Let it guide you, not to answers, but to wonder. And when the path ends, may you return not with trophies or truths, but with calm and the memory of quiet magic.